Imagine walking into a war with a bullet lodged in your left shoulder. It is January 1815, and your arm is shattered. It hangs in a sling because a doctor almost cut it off, saying it needed to be amputated. You told that doctor to go to hell. This was the insane reality for Andrew Jackson. Modern hysteria tells you he was just a bloodthirsty monster. They say he was a simple killer with a dark soul. But those historians usually forget the actual facts of his life. They forget he was a complete orphan by age 14. They forget he watched his entire family die in the American Revolution. They forget the British officer who slashed his forehead with a sword. In this unauthorized documentary, we aren't looking for the safe version of history. We are looking for the man who saved the Republic when it was dying. We're looking for the man who adopted a native baby on a battlefield. We're looking for the man who paid black soldiers equal wages in 1814. Most of all, we're looking for the man who broke the central bank. Welcome to the real story of Old Hickory. This is the truth the experts want to cancel. The orphan of the Revolution. Andrew Jackson was not born into a life of privilege or peace. He was forged in the absolute chaos of the American Revolution. While modern historians focus on his temper, they ignore his source code. This is the fundamental programming that built the man. In 1780, at just 13 years old, Andrew and his brother Robert volunteered. They weren't playing soldier, they were militia couriers in a guerrilla war. This was a world of facts over hysteria before the terms existed. His oldest brother, Hugh, was the first to pay the price. Hugh fought at the Battle of Stono Ferry in June 1779. He didn't die from a bullet, but from the brutal mechanical reality of war. He collapsed from heat exhaustion and respiratory failure after the fight. Soon after, Andrew and Robert were captured by a British raiding party. This is where the legendary defiance began. A British officer ordered 13-year-old Andrew to scrub his muddy boots. Young Andrew looked him in the eye and refused. He claimed his legal status as a prisoner of war. The officer didn't debate him. He slashed him with a heavy sword. That blade left permanent scars on Andrew's forehead and his left hand. But the British weren't finished with the Jackson family. While in a crowded prison camp, Robert contracted smallpox. He died just 2 days after their mother negotiated their release. Then, his mother, Elizabeth, headed to Charleston to nurse wounded Americans. She contracted ship fever, or typhus, and died in November 1781. By age 14, Andrew Jackson was a complete orphan of the Revolution. He had no parents, no brothers, and no inheritance. All he had was a scar on his face and a burning hatred for tyranny. The Nashville Brawl. Before he saved the country, Jackson had to survive his own neighborhood. In 1813, he was a Tennessee frontier lawyer with a hair-trigger temper. This is where the hysteria crowd starts clutching their pearls. Jackson got into a chaotic brawl at the City Hotel with the Benton brothers. This wasn't a civilized duel with rules and a referee. It was a messy explosion of pistols, daggers, and falling down stairs. Jesse Benton fired a slug and a ball into Jackson's left shoulder. The lead shattered the bone and tore through the muscle. Doctors prepared to amputate his arm to save his life. Jackson looked at the saw and said, "I'll keep my arm." He led his army into the woods with a shattered shoulder in a sling. He carried that bullet in his body for 19 years. Imagine leading 4,000 men into a swamp while literally leaking lead. This physical durability became a massive psychological weapon. His men saw a leader who simply refused to die. They called him Old Hickory because he was as tough as the wood. He wasn't just a general, he was a force of nature. And he was about to face the most professional killing machine on Earth. The Battle of New Orleans. In 1815, the British were coming to reclaim the entire American continent. They sent over 8,000 battle-hardened redcoats. Biographer John Meacham calls Jackson a lion. But he was a lion who could be a cold-blooded killer in the night. The British were about to find out exactly what that meant. Jackson met them with a misfit army of only 4,000. He had Tennessee marksmen, Jean Lafitte's pirates, and Choctaw warriors. Most importantly, he had 2 battalions of free men of color. But when these black soldiers arrived, the white troops met them with jeers. Jackson didn't offer a lecture on identity, he offered a command on reality. He told them they would fight beside a cup of coffee if he ordered it. It wasn't nice, but it was devastatingly effective. He addressed these men as fellow citizens and sons of freedom. He fought the War Department to ensure those black soldiers received equal pay. Jackson didn't even wait for the British to finish their tea. He launched a brutal night raid using his Choctaw allies in the dark. The British complained that Jackson was fighting an uncivilized war. Jackson's response was pure, old hickory logic. If you want a civilized gentleman's game, don't invade my country. He built a mile-long mud wall called Line Jackson. On January 8th, the most powerful army on Earth was decimated in 30 minutes. The British lost over 2,000 men. Jackson lost only 13. This victory became a permanent national security deterrent. The United States has not been invaded by a foreign power since. Jackson's victory sent a source code message to the world. This house is protected by people you cannot break. To the average American in 1815, this made Jackson a living god. George Washington was the father who gave them a country, but Jackson was the son who proved they could keep it. At the time, his fame actually eclipsed George Washington's. The compassionate warrior. Modern hysteria tries to paint Jackson as a one-dimensional villain, but the actual facts tell a much more complex story. In 1813, Jackson found a Creek infant orphaned on a battlefield. Jackson asked the surviving native women to nurse the child. They refused, saying that since his family was dead, he should die too. Jackson didn't accept that. He took the child, named him Lincoya, and raised him as a son. Lincoya lived at the Hermitage and was intended for West Point. This bloodthirsty man also relied on native allies to save the Republic. At the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, 500 Cherokee warriors fought under his command. More importantly, look at his interaction with the Creek leader William Weatherford, or Red Eagle. Red Eagle led the Red Stick Rebellion, which burned and attacked settled towns in Alabama and Georgia. Andrew Jackson's battalion was called to end the rebellion by any means necessary, and they did. His troops decimated Red Eagle's warriors in short time. After the war, Red Eagle walked alone into Jackson's tent to surrender and beg him to send food to the Red Creek women and children who survived the war. Most generals would have executed him on the spot. Jackson was so impressed by Red Eagle's hard man honor that he spared him. He sat down and shared a meal with the man he had just defeated, then ordered his troops to send food and blankets to the Red Creek women and children. He didn't view the world through identity politics. He viewed it through character. The people's president. Before Andrew Jackson, the presidency was a club for the elite. He was the first president who didn't come from a wealthy, established family. He was born in a log cabin to poor Irish immigrants. His 1829 inauguration set the stage for his infamous presidency. Thousands of common men swarmed the White House to celebrate. They broke china, stood on furniture, and spilled punch on the carpets. The elite called it the reign of King Mob. They were terrified because the power had finally shifted to the working man. Jackson didn't apologize. He knew exactly who he represented. The Bank War. Jackson took that same aggression into the boardrooms of the financial elite. He went after the second bank of the United States. It was a private corporation run by Nicholas Biddle and wealthy stockholders. Some of those stockholders were even British. Jackson saw this as a hydra-headed monster of crony capitalism. He believed the bank manipulated credit to exploit the working man. In 1832, Jackson vetoed the recharter of the bank. Nicholas Biddle tried to crash the economy to force Jackson to fold. Jackson told his vice president, "The bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it." In 1835, a man named Richard Lawrence tried to assassinate him with 2 pistols. Both guns misfired, a literal 1 in 125,000 chance. At 67, Jackson didn't run. He beat the assassin with his cane. Jackson didn't hate banks. He hated a system rigged for the few. The hysteria check. In 2026, the Trail of Tears is the primary weapon used to cancel Jackson. But we have to look at the harsh reality of the 1830s. States like Georgia were threatening civil war over native lands. Jackson was faced with a brutal, zero-sum choice. Option A: leave the tribes to be massacred by unregulated state militias. Option B: use federal power to relocate them to the West to preserve them. He also feared Britain would use native nations as staging grounds for invasion. He saw removal as a geopolitical necessity for national survival. The execution of this policy was a human catastrophe and a tragedy. But Jackson's intent wasn't genocide. It was preserving the Republic. He made a hard man choice in a world that didn't offer a nice one. The resolution. So, who was the real Andrew Jackson? As biographer John Meacham put it, Jackson represented the best and worst of the American character in the early 1800s. He bravely fought to save the Union and showed compassion where most wouldn't. But he was also an unapologetic slaveholder and orchestrated the Trail of Tears. He was the anomaly. He was a man who would fight a duel at dawn and adopt an orphaned enemy baby at noon. He proved that the American source code belongs to the man in the log cabin. Modern hysteria wants to erase him, using modern-day standards of morality to judge him. But without him, there might not be a United States to complain about. He didn't just save the Republic, he made it untouchable. He was Old Hickory. And in a world full of hysteria, we could use a little more of his facts.